And today's scenario is this. We have a level. We have some things that we either need to collect or destroy or whatever. It's either enemies that we need to kill or it's items that we need to collect. Like what do you got? Train tracks. We got a bunch of train tracks here, folks. And what we don't want is to say somewhere in our code to say like if. Did you start recording?
I did.
Okay. Fun time. So what we don't want to say is like if tracks equals or items. I'm going to use items, not tracks. Get that out of my head. If items equals 4, pass level. Okay, that's not what we're doing. And the reason why we're not doing this is because if we decide that like, oh, we need to make this game a little bit easier, that was too hard. And now we have to go in and like erase this and make that a 3. And then on the next level that we designed, we put in like that many. Then we have to like write a whole separate code. And now in the new code, that has to be a 6. And so that's not gonna work. So, how do we do this in such a way that it's robust enough that it doesn't matter how many items or enemies or tokens, that we can change it and our code still survives? Sure.
Variables.
Yeah, so what should I put here?
An integer.
Okay, how about like items needed?
Yeah. Make it an integer.
That's an integer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Y'all should all know that. I should not have been able to raise my hands.
So we have items and it equals the items needed, then we're gonna pass the level. And so, so now how do we know how many items are needed? Any thoughts on that?
Number of items, like
How should we count them? How do we count each of those?
well, every time you instantiate one.
Every time we instantiate one, we can have that number go up by 1, right?
Yeah.
So what we can do is in the item script, we can say inside of start, we can say items needed plus plus, or plus equals 1, or whatever your favorite way of writing that exact same sentence is. Plus equals 1. And then that way, every time an item is loaded in the scene, the items needed goes up by 1. Okay, and so that's in the item script. But where do we want to create this variable itself? If we create it in the item script, like if we say in start items needed equals 0, then every single item that's created, it's going to go back to 0 and then count up to 1 and go back to 0 and count up to 1. So this items needed can't exist in the item script. So where should we put it? Pretty much anywhere else, but let's just put it in our player script. So player script. So inside of player script, we're going to have an int. That was your suggestion, make it an int. We're going to make it public. The reason why we're making it public is not because we're going to affect it in the inspector, but because we want the item script to reference it, so it needs to be public. And we'll call it items needed. Okay, and actually we can set it equals 0. So now we have this public value called items needed, and we have this thing going up over here. So how do we get this to know that it's that items needed that's going up? We're going to have our player, we're gonna have a reference to our player script. So we're gonna have player script called player. And inside of our start, we're going to reference our player. So we're going to say player equals, this is a weird one, capital G game object. It's very rare that we use the capital G game object. Game object dot, and we have a few choices here. We can either do like find object by tag, and then we put in the tag like player, or instead of that we could also do find object, I think it's like of type, and then in here we type in the word player script. So two separate ways of finding that player. We do that in start, and now we have reference to the player that items needed. Does that make sense to people? Okay, so at the beginning of this game, we have a room, and the room looks like that. And right now in this room, that's the entirety of my scene. What is the value at the beginning of the game right now of items needed? How many items do we need? 0. Okay. And how many do we need now? 1. Someone over here. And how many do we need now? 3. Because each time each of these gets created, this goes up by 1. Great. Okay. And so then, or we'll go back into that game. We collect this item, and now the value of items is equal to 1, and items needed was 2. And then we collect this item, and now the value in items is 2, and items needed was 2. And so now we can do our thing. And our thing is going to be switch levels. Or whatever, something like switch levels, or you win, or whatever it is. The door opens. So, the other thing that we need to do is, and it's not going to be, it's not required, but a good thing that you might want to do is set these back to 0. So you might want to say items equals 0, and you might want to say items needed equals 0. And the reason why we want to do this is so that when we switch level, all of our counters are reset back. The real reason why we want to do it is on Thursday's lesson, we're going to have this situation where we have a whole nother room over here. Anyone play a game called Zelda before? So imagine that we have these enemies. These are not enemies and not coins. We have these enemies in Zelda in level 1. And in room 2, we have these enemies. And what we want to do, this is setting up Thursday's problem, is we want to kill this enemy, leave the room, and come over here, maybe kill this enemy and this enemy, run back into this room, and have this enemy still be gone. And then run back into this room and have these two enemies still gone. Does that make sense? So this setup here, is sort of a precursor to that lesson, okay? And in that lesson, we will definitely have to do this. In today's lesson, it's optional. In that lesson, it's required. And we'll talk about that more on Thursday. Is there any questions on this?
Is it a problem, like, if you instantiate, like before the items are instantiated, is it a problem that, because items and items needed would both be 0, right? So technically.
Well, this would be like, On collision, enter 2D. So this is like if we hit our door, if we hit our flag, or if we hit our. Does that make sense? Good question. Yeah, this wouldn't be running in like start or update. This would be like, yeah.
This is a pretty general question. Is on-collision enter 2D can be applied with anything?
Yeah, that's anything with a collider. And so then we would need to say like, if we hit our exit. And then all this code would be wrapped into that. Sorry, I didn't set that up very well at the beginning. Questions? That was a really good one, Saul. Okay, that's it for today.